And we are live. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much today for joining us for State of Angular. We're so excited to have you all. We do this event every few months with the Angular team to talk about upcoming releases, milestones, and all the amazing community initiatives that are happening. Thank you so much to our sponsors today. So thank you so much. It's been amazing. Minko specifically coordinating with you. And, thank you so much for sponsoring this event today. Do you have anything to say about Angular? Are you guys hiring?
I think we might be hiring, but I don't know. Jeremy, do you want to talk about this?
We were hiring. I think we might have some people in the pipeline, but I'm not actually sure. None of us here is the hiring manager, so.
Yeah, not something we should promote we can promote right now.
Well, slide into Jeremy or Minko's DMs and maybe they can hook you up with the right person if you're interested. This Labs as well. So we're about a 50% consultancy now, and we love Angular, React, all the things. So, we're also hiring, actually. So if you're excited about working on just really cool projects, like we're working with Wikimedia, Twilio, Cloudinary, just some really fun people these days, definitely check us out. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about just this media ecosystem really quickly. We have a lot of really fun upcoming events that are happening. So GraphQL Contributor Days, if you guys care about GraphQL and you kind of want to hang out with GraphQL Foundation folks and just, talk about all things GraphQL and kind of learn what enterprises are doing, definitely come to that. State of Application Monitoring as well is coming up very soon. And then we have monthly mentoring. So this is a 1 hour monthly mentoring that we do for women in tech. Really, it's just come hang out and talk about what you need in tech. So that's a really fun one. And then React Contributor Days also is hitting very soon. So definitely check that out if you care about React and the React ecosystem. I'm one of your hosts today. My name's Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter @LadyLeet. I'm the CEO of this Labs, and I'm joined by Minko. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure, yeah. My name is Minko. I'm working on Angular.
Cool. And we have a lot of really amazing panelists as well. I will have them introduce themselves during the panel section, but, start queuing up your questions, drop them in the comments in YouTube, or drop them on Twitter as well. But we've been getting a lot of really great questions and we're really excited to have those conversations. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Minko now, who will be giving us the state of Angular. So let me go ahead and add that. There you go, Minko.
Why not do some brief introductions of Jeremy, Mark, Keen?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna call you out one by one, the order I see you here in the stream. Jeremy, you're first.
Hello. I'm Jeremy. I'm an engineer who works on Angular components and a little bit on the framework, and I've been around for a while.
Mark, you're next.
Hey friends, I'm Mark Thompson. You can find me at Mark Texan online, and I'm a developer relations engineer here on the Angular team.
Keen.
Hey everyone, I'm Keen. I worked on mostly the Angular CLI and the language service.
Emma.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Emma Twersky, and I'm also a developer relations engineer at Google.
Cindy.
Hi everybody, I'm Cindy. I'm a program manager for the Angular team, and I actually work on everything. And it's nice to be here.
Awesome. So thank you very much for tuning in today. I will share a brief presentation with you about the current state of Angular, pretty much what we have been up to, where are we heading, and what you should be expecting from the future major release. And after that, together with the team, we're going to answer your questions. As you saw here, there are experts and pretty much everything across the board in our Angular platform. So looking forward to our discussion at the end. So you probably already know that Angular is a Google technology. Something that you didn't know is that Google pretty much runs on Angular. It doesn't matter what position you have in Google, you're probably going to want to open an issue that is going to be a multi-step resolution process. And you're going to interact with a platform developed in Angular in order to file this bug and track it. If you're a software engineer and you want to look up some source code in our huge monorepo, you're going to interact with the user interface that is implementing a view to this monorepo that is implemented in Angular. If you want to edit some source code, well, you'll be using a text editor implemented in Angular. And when you open this change list of changes to the monorepository, your colleagues are going to review it in another Angular system. These are just 4 examples of applications in Google that are developed with Angular, and there are thousands of others. Some of them are small applications for the cafeterias, others are large public-facing apps, such as, let's say, Google Cloud, we have Firebase, Google Domain, and Google Analytics. On these applications, we have quite a few people working on them, actually. One of the powers of the monorepo is that we can very easily track who is interacting with individual technologies. So we can see how many Angular developers are there. It is a really interesting infrastructure, actually. And there are thousands of developers, Googlers, using Angular within this monorepo, and about 1,000 people are taking our internal Angular course every year. So given how big is the investments and how widely adopted Angular is within Google, sometimes an interesting question is, why are we building the technology open source? Why we're not building it just for Google? Well, there are quite a few answers for this. First of all, we're providing value to everyone by open sourcing this technology and allowing it to grow. But also, well, having an open source tech stack that is popular across the world is also helping with hiring, clearly, right? I'm actually a good example for this. I joined the team by just contributing to Angular and the Angular ecosystem. And there are thousands of other engineers who are hired in Google, also thanks to Angular being as part of their resume. The ecosystem that the entire community is building is far above what an individual team of people can achieve. We have tens of thousands of different libraries, frameworks built on top of Angular, and tools for static analysis, development tooling of any kind. It's just fascinating to see what the community has been building over the years. Also content and Stack Overflow answers. It's just countless of different contributions from folks. Clearly, we're getting a lot of feedback from a lot of external events, talking to developers on online conferences, or just whenever we were able to travel, meeting them in person, discussing different potential ways to improve the framework with enterprises and developers. Quality is another aspect. There are quite a few people who have been contributing to the Angular repository in different ways, just helping us improve the documentation or moving forward with some bug fixes that were blockers for them, and just generally making sure that everything fits very high quality standards has been from a very high priority for us. I want to spend some time talking a little bit about the ecosystem, because I believe this is one of the most unique parts of Angular. And I have been very heavily involved in it for the past many years now, before joining Google as an external contributor. So recently, we noticed significant adoption increase. In fact, we're looking at a variety of different metrics, and most of them are inaccurate, because at the end, Angular is just a JavaScript file that you put on a web page. So it's hard to see how many people are referencing this file from different sources. But one of the metrics that we track is the number of NPM downloads. So we saw that about over the past year, the number of weekly NPM downloads increased from 1.4 million to 2.5 million. And this doesn't include the thousands of enterprises who are using Angular from behind a firewall or having a private NPM registry. Currently, there are also 1.7 million open source projects on GitHub using Angular. these projects vary from just example projects or even our Hello World app to more advanced projects such as large components, toolkits, different web applications for, let's say, Apache Foundation. They were using Angular for some of their projects, to large examples. For example, what Trang Vo built, pretty much Spotify client implemented entirely with Angular. That is pretty much a drop-in replacement for the Spotify app. And I guess the coolest part here is that this is completely open source. So you can look into the implementation and see how to build a non-trivial application just by opening GitHub and following his work there. Other applications developed freely on GitHub were in fact trying to fight COVID during the global pandemic. We had the privilege to collaborate with Harvard on their research for finding an antiviral for COVID, where they built their visualizations using Angular. Other developers on GitHub are building tools on top of, based on the framework, so that they can fill gaps which are eventually outside of the scope of the team. For example, Manfred Stehr has been doing an extensive research in the space of micro frontends in order to help enterprises build independent deployability and more scalable development of their enterprise applications. And we have been collaborating with different folks, including Yandong and Leon from Ant Design and G0, in order to implement an image component that helps you improve your core web vital metrics. Talking about core web vitals, there is this initiative to introduce them as part of the search ranking algorithm, which means that performance and even user experience is going to be somewhat considered for the SEO ranking of your page. Chrome, they have the Web SDK team that is helping across the board, the different frameworks, different open source technologies, to reach certain performance standards by analyzing their applications and seeing how they can improve in different areas. Together with this team and the Chrome Metrics team, we worked on the implementation, on the definition of pretty much of largest contentful paint, in order to make sure that more destructive hydration of the view once the client-side rendering takes over the server-side rendered content doesn't impact largest contentful paint as it doesn't impact user experience. We reiterate on this metric in order to allow pretty much the entire ecosystem to benefit out of the final result. Chrome also identified that a few potential improvements in Angular and other frameworks right now are in terms of font inlining and extraction and inlining of critical CSS. So these are two features that Chrome identified, and together we were able to implement as part of the official Angular CLI experience. So talking about SEO, one of the partners that we have been working closely with is Crunchbase. They celebrated their success with Angular, and specifically how Angular helped them have good SEO and fast surf time in their blog post on why they made the transition to the framework. So currently they have 1 million weekly users, and 70% of them are coming from organic traffic. By switching to Angular, they were able to reduce their surf time from 20 seconds from some of their heaviest pages to about 150 milliseconds. So it is pretty exciting to read about their journey. If you're interested in following it up as well, you can check the URL here in the slides. So you know probably that we have these regular releases every 6 months, major releases every 6 months. Version 12, we're planning for May. And there are two major efforts that are going to happen as part of version 12. First, we're going to enable ourselves to take advantage of some modern standards that we weren't able to. And also, we're going to invest into simplifying Angular in two different ways. First, make it simpler for developers, and also make it simpler for ourselves so that we can decrease the maintenance costs for some obsolete modules. And the second is our regular set of feature drops. We want to let you use some new features, and we have been doing this not only in major releases, but frequently in minors as well, enabling different features as an opt-in. On enabling modern standards and simplification, something that we have been looking at is deprecation of IE 11 support. So we're going to decide on the right way to move forward with this in an inclusive way. We're going to open an RFC where we're going to discuss what will be the right steps to move forward. But this is going to enable us to take advantage of new standards, such as, let's say, CSS variables. The next step is deprecation of View Engine. So the chances are that you're not depending on View Engine already, if we look at our statistics. But View Engine is this rendering and compilation pipeline that we were using prior to version 9, prior to Ivy. As part of our telemetry, we're collecting some information for people who have opted into it on whether folks are creating Ivy or View Engine applications. And looking at the version 11 statistics, it looks like pretty much nobody's opting into a View Engine at this point. So this made us feel confident that we can take steps forward to remove the creation of View Engine applications by default and transition away from it so that we can make Angular simpler, removing some ng factory APIs that are no longer relevant with Ivy, and also make it simpler for maintenance. By removing an entire new Angular like rendering engine, we'll be able to start moving faster in evolving Ivy itself. So the first step of the process is going to be to just remove the enable Ivy flag from the CLI. All the applications are going to be Ivy anyway. And this would still not prevent you from using any View Engine libraries in your Ivy applications because we have the Angular compatibility compiler. This is the tool that you have been seeing running right after you run your npm install script. And in version 13 currently, we're planning to enable the stable Ivy library distribution strategy. We were originally planning this for version 12, but we wanted to give the ecosystem a little bit more time so that we can prepare and finalize the partial compilation format. So this means that there are going to be fewer and fewer cases in which you're going to need NGCC, and generally you're going to have faster development experience over time. Now let me spend some time talking about the feature drops. These feature drops, we started as early on as version 11, in fact. For example, we enabled opt-in preview of our Webpack version 5 support that is going to be enabled by default in version 12. As part of the improvements brought by Webpack, we're expecting to have better tree shaking and from there a little bit smaller bundles, and to also enable module federation through community plugins. We have been working heavily on the Angular Ivy language service, which is based on the Angular compiler. So this is going to be the default experience in version 12. It has been available as an opt-in for over the past, I believe, 2 minor releases. But in version 12, you'll be able to use it by default and get better type checking and type inference in templates. A project that was aiming to simplify Angular, which was part of version 11.1, I believe, was the effort on improving the error messages. So now when you get any of the most common Angular error messages, you're also going to get the URL. When you click on this URL, you're going to directly go to a page that explains what this error is all about and how you can fix it. And resource inlining. So the Google font inlining is already enabled by default in version 11, but in version 12, we're going to enable by default our critical CSS inlining for client-side rendered applications, app shell, pre-rendering, and server-side rendering. All right, so these are all features that we started in version 11, and we enabled them as an opt-in, and now we're going to enable them by default in version 12. Let's talk about what's coming directly in version 12. And this is a little bit of a rough list because a lot of other features we're going to ship in minor releases after that. Inline SAS support has been a very highly requested feature from folks. Just having the opportunity to use SAS in inline styles. Faster tests. We're planning some changes in testbed. Although this may not land in version 12 by itself, we're planning to enable it as an opt-in in the subsequent minor releases. This is going to lead to significant improvements of your unit tests. To better align with the ecosystem, we have been working towards like higher consistency and better interoperability with other tools, for example, with hosting services such as Vercel and Microsoft Static Sites, where they're expecting npm run builds to produce production assets by default. So to ensure this consistency with the ecosystem, we are also planning to enable production builds by default for everyone, rather than having to explicitly specify production environment. And strict mode. Just wanted to make our type checking stricter and enable better development experience with our language service. This is going to be, excuse me, the default experience for developers in version 12, from which you can eventually even opt out of if you prefer to have less strict type checking for rapid prototyping. Something that we have been particularly excited about actually was the fact that, well, I was looking at the Angular monorepo the other day, and I noticed we have over 18,000 pull requests open to the monorepo, which was a pretty impressive number. Currently, based on the efforts as part of our operation dialog, where we're trying to triage as many issues as possible, we managed to have fewer than 256 open PRs. Everything else is merged, or like maybe a certain percentage of these PRs were just not relevant already, and we closed them. It might be a little bit confusing if you're looking at our monorepo, because we have slightly unconventional way of cherry picking PRs and merging them. So a lot of these 18,000, they look close, but in fact they were merged in the monorepo. So it was just like interesting to see how active our community has been, because a large percentage of these PRs were actually not from the team. And you can see that as part of the version 12 release as well. In fact, some of the highly requested features from the community were implemented by community members. For instance, we have HTTP requests metadata available in interceptors that was implemented by Damas. Min and max validators in forms implemented by Sonu. We have emit event option to abstract control classes implemented by Mike, and app initializer with observables by Yadong. So all these features were implemented thanks to community contributions that folks opened and were able to move forward and merge. I think that's one of the biggest strengths of open source in general, being able to collaborate together. It doesn't matter whether you're geographically located. You just have a common shared passion, and you work together for better technology. Well, that was everything I had for you today. I would really appreciate your feedback about this presentation on mgvi.io/talk, and yeah, we would love to answer your questions now.
Awesome, thank you. And so now goes to our panel discussions, and there's been a lot of really amazing conversation in the YouTube comments, so I can read a few of those off and maybe we can get started. Did you guys see any that you want to answer, like any burning ones that you guys want to answer first, or should I just pick one and go?
I say go for it.
Okay. This one's funny. A lot of people are saying, what gods? Thank God. How about those slow builds? Which gods do we need to pray to get ES build support?
Keen, maybe.
Yeah.
You can say some?
I can take that. So we have actually done a lot to improve incremental build performance. There are some features that have already landed and some are going to land in version 12. So we expect incremental build to be a lot faster. ES build is tricky because ES build is technically still experimental. We do use it in some of our internal repos and we find that it is actually super fast and really good. But when we make a decision, especially for a bundler, we need to take into account all the different use cases out there, the bundle size that it produces, and how well minification works and all that. So we are evaluating it, but it's going to take a while.
Next one. This one is any new updates and or upcoming features coming to Angular Elements? And then also, when will Angular Flex Layout Library see a version 1 release?
Let's see. So on the Angular Elements front, I don't think we have anything on our short-term roadmap. I did some work within the last year of looking at a bunch of custom elements related issues and areas for improvement. And so that's something that's kind of sitting in our backlog that hasn't really percolated up near the top yet versus other priorities. As for Flex Layout, Minko, have we put out our plans for that yet?
Not yet. That's still in progress.
Okay, we're still deciding some things about Flex Layout and don't have anything to share about that yet.
Yeah.
But maybe NGConf? No, maybe after.
We'll see. We're thinking of the right way to move forward. So the standards pretty much evolved a lot since Flex Layouts since the experimental version of Flex Layout was released, and we're thinking about the best way to move forward with using the modern standards, but at the same time without causing much trouble for developers. So it has been really tricky. A lot of the things there are not. Actually, Emma can talk about this. She has been looking in the space a lot, but it's just hard to statically analyze and automatically migrate.
Cool. Okay, this is a random one. Have you heard any complaints about ESLint performance versus TSLint, particularly the parser?
I can talk. Maybe Keen, do you want to take this or?
You can take it.
Yeah, we were looking into this originally. Actually, that was one of the reasons why it took us a while to move forward with removing TSLint and working with James on ESLint path forward. It depends on the size of the application. Generally, ESLint is doing more work and it is slower and consumes more memory. But it depends how big your application is. For not too large applications, the difference shouldn't matter too much. If there's 10 to 15 to even 20%, it would not make huge of a difference. Maybe your CI may time out or get out of memory, but that's mostly for the larger applications.
Another question is, any plans for Snowpack integration?
I think the answer for ES-Build also applies here. We are evaluating different options out there, but at least for now, in the near future, there is no plan for integration.
This one is a hot one. I keep seeing this. This was also asked on Twitter. Angular dev tools. When?
Yeah. Probably soon.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Angular dev tools and kind of what people might expect? Or is there any other information that they can find online to learn about it a little bit more?
Sure. There is no information about it online yet. It has been, it has been, I don't know how to express that, exciting to work on different features, and we have been slowly expanding the group of people who are able to test DevTools and experiment with it. So we're hoping to reach a public beta anytime like soon, but can't commit to a particular date just yet. DevTools is a Chrome DevTools extension that allows you to debug your Angular apps, understand their change detection, and also preview their component structure. And it is only built for support of Ivy applications because it relies on some debugging APIs that Ivy provides, and it would not have support for Vue Engine apps. For Vue Engine, I would recommend you to just use Augury, which...
Love Angular Augury.
Yeah, it provides, let's say, different set of functionalities. You have definitely the component explorer there and a bunch of other utilities for debugging, let's say, your injector tree or understanding your router tree and so on.
So was Angular DevTools one of those things where like you told a group of people and you were like, don't tell anybody? And then like for so everybody told everyone and now it's like, wait, where is it? Okay, here is another question. What about optional ng module and lazy loading components? Can we see it sooner in the next Angular versions?
So this is another thing that this is relatively high up on our backlog. I don't know that it is like, so basically our roadmap is just like the top slice of our backlog. And I believe the optional ng modules, it's close to being near the top of that, but like it's close to getting to the point where it's in that slice. Although it's worth saying that, you know, priorities can change, and so if something else may come in ahead of it before it gets a chance to move into that slice. But it is something that we very much want to do. And also like lazy loading components, that is something that like you can do today. We have something in our backlog similarly positioned that is oriented around making lazy loading of like individual components or directives easier or more ergonomic. But again, like similar position where it's not very far down in our backlog, but it also hasn't gotten up to the point where we're working on it yet.
Will V12 produce a smaller build size?
It depends.
I think the only thing I can add to this is we are constantly tracking build size. So regression is not acceptable. Any regression is always being investigated.
Yeah. So like we track the payload size of Angular pretty aggressively. Basically, anytime the size of the framework or its constituent components changes by more than 500 bytes, it requires a special approval, which is kind of annoying during development, but we monitor it very closely. And one nice thing that is coming in V12 is that there are some APIs that have been made more tree shakeable, which effectively means that if you're not using those APIs, they'll no longer end up in your bundle. But if you're using those APIs, then they will end up in your bundle still. So in some cases, maybe you'll see some small increases, but I don't think there's anything major changing for V12 in particular.
Any plans in supporting observables in component input? I think observables, not observances.
Yeah. Not right now. This is something it's kind of a through line in all of our conversations around future feature enhancements or evolutions for Angular. Mingo can also talk about this, but we like basically hear an equal amount of feedback of I want less reactive stuff and I want more reactive stuff. And it's about the same volume on both sides. So it's something we think about pretty often in terms of like, well, do we make it so that it's easier to use like observables and streams and whatnot, or do we kind of make it so that you don't have to use some of that stuff? We don't have anything concrete decided at this point, but that particular feature of having like observable inputs is something we've heard a number of times.
Yeah, we are thinking how to make it in a way that we don't necessarily couple the framework more with RX, but enable it. So it's interesting one. There are discussions on how this is doable, but no timeline for it yet, as Jeremy said.
So if you want it, create a bot to open GitHub issues on the Angular repo. I'm just kidding. Okay, so next question is, any plans for typed Angular forms?
Yes, it is planned. This is, for context, this is like the #1 highest voted GitHub issue, and it's extremely close to the top of our backlog. Really the reason we haven't done it yet is that inside of Google, it's actually a really large amount of work to do this, because the way Google source code works is all of Google is in one repository, like monorepo, and you have one version of everything. And so when we make a change to Angular, we have to make sure that doesn't break any of the thousands of applications in Google. And so just adding the typings, that's really easy, but then not breaking the build for those thousands of Google applications is really hard. And so it actually is a decently large effort to go and do this and make sure we don't break anyone in Google and bring them all along to the strictly typed place. And so once the current set of projects we're working on is wrapped up, that is one of the projects that is like very close to getting worked on.
Yeah, and just to add, if we break projects at Google, this means that we're going to break anyone who is moving to the next version of Forms. And there is no trivial way to automatically migrate people with the ng update experience. So yeah, we're going to break a lot of people, and we don't want to do that.
We may be able to provide some help with ng update, but it's unclear yet how much it will be able to do automatically.
Next question, do you think Protractor is still the best tool for Angular end-to-end? And any thoughts about dropping it for the future?
This question came at the perfect timing because we are going to publish the RFC tomorrow on Protractor. We are going to lay out what we think the best long-term plan is, and we will be asking the community to please provide feedback. Yeah, look for the RFC tomorrow. It will be published on the Protractor repository on GitHub.
Yeah, and for anybody that doesn't know, RFC is request for comments.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I guess this is kind of related, which probably is, you should look out for the RFC. But with any Protractor changes, is there plans potentially to go to Cypress? Is that one of the options that you guys are considering?
The TLDR is, it really depends on the requirements of the project. Whether cross-browser support is important, whether stability, WebDriver, conformance to WebDriver specifications a factor. So all that will eventually help you decide, which platform is better.
Next question. Any word on zone-free Angular? And check in public.
Yeah, so zone-free Angular is something that this is probably the thing we are talking about the most. I just spent an hour talking about this with Mishko yesterday, figuring out what our plan's going to be. It is a very difficult problem because Zone is so baked into Angular, and so much of Angular's identity as the framework depends on Zone for that just automatic, magical, your application just stays up to dateness. But at the same time, that magic comes with trade-offs. So we're talking about it a lot. We haven't decided exactly what we're going to do yet, but we're still figuring it out.
Cool. We can take a break and say, Mark, your YouTube videos are greatly appreciated.
Thank you for that. Thank you for watching, and continue to watch. Let us know what you want to see, because we're cooking up so much stuff. And Alexander, shout out to you know what? Put your hand up where you are, Alexander. See this? High five from me to you. Thank you for watching.
And make sure to like and subscribe. Smash
Thank
that
you.
like button.
That's
Same
right.
thing for the Thought Media's channel. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like this content. All right. So next up, is there any plans for a simpler animation API?
No. we don't have any plans to really do anything with the animations module in the near future. Kind of long term, as CSS evolves, the web ecosystem changes very quickly. And so similarly to how people have asked about like ESBuild and Snowpack, right? We're always looking at stuff as it comes out and saying like, hey, like, is what we're doing does it still make sense? Should we still be doing this? And we'll be doing that for animations as more CSS stuff evolves. And in the short term, I don't foresee us making any substantive changes to the animations module in 2021.
Someone heard a little rumor that the Angular material team is rolling out internally in Google the experimental components.
Yes. It's not a rumor. It's just from comments I make on GitHub. Yes. So the context here is the Angular components team. We are working on a relatively large refactor of Angular material that takes the MDC web primitives produced by the material design team and incorporates those into Angular material. This is not a rewrite of Angular material. It is more of a large refactoring. I say it's not a rewrite because a lot of the code for the components is exactly the same between the two versions. All of the unit tests are pretty much exactly the same. We just like copied the unit test directly over. They have feature parity, they have API parity. The main thing that changes is the DOM structure and the styles, which granted is a relatively large change, right? As it's going to change the way your application looks. But in terms of a compatibility standpoint, they're mostly drop-in replacements with some very small API changes here and there. They are currently in our NPM package called Material Experimental, which is where we have our non-stable work. And we are, in fact, actively rolling out these new versions of the components inside of Google. And we are doing that because we have more control over that rollout inside of Google, and we have more control over how people use things. And we have a more direct line of communication into the developers on those applications. We can see their application source code because, again, monorepo. And so it's easier for us to start this rollout process in Google so we can get feedback and iterate on the component APIs and fix any bugs before we lock them into stable on NPM, where once we make them stable on NPM, we have at least a year before we can make breaking changes to that API. And we're not at a phase yet where they're stable enough to go that whole year without making breaking changes. And so the question of like, when can we expect them to be stable on NPM? I don't have an answer for that yet. Because it really depends on the type of feedback we get and the things we run into as we're rolling them out in Google. If we get to a point where we're not getting many new bugs and we're not really making any API changes anymore and people are continuing to adopt, everything seems to be going well, then we'll probably go to stabilize them at that point. I don't have a specific version though to really point to right now. I will say though that like you can use those components from the experimental package. They just are subject to breaking changes really at any time. Those don't. Our experimental packages don't follow Semver, right? Any change can be a breaking change.
Another fun question was, is Angular supporting JSX in V13?
No. I can definitively say that we have no plans at this time to like ever add like JSX support. JSX fundamentally doesn't work with Angular's like architecture idioms.
Here's a fun request. Any chance we can have UI router type feature like includes?
I don't know what that is.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Let me see. Here we go. What is the status of the Ivy library distribution?
I can answer that one. So as of version 12, the Ivy library distribution format should be stable. However, also in version 12, we will not yet be publishing Angular's own first-party packages with the Ivy distribution format. And we're doing this to just keep a through line of stability, so that going from 12 to 13, we will basically we're turning off view engine builds for version 12 application builds. There'll be more about this in our communications around V12, but starting with version 12, applications will be pushed to build more with Ivy. And so by the time we get to 13, we hope to switch all of Angular's packages over to the Ivy distribution format and encourage all of the third-party ecosystem, with which we have a number of partners, to also switch over to that distribution format. And from that point forward, I think NGCC will stick around for a little bit longer so that it will still work with packages before that. But there is a event horizon for NGCC at this point. Minko and Keen, did everything I say there, was that correct?
Yeah, sounds correct.
I have a question. I saw, I don't know when I saw this, but the Tailwind support in Angular. So what led to that decision? What are your guys' hopes for that?
Emma and Keen probably are the right people to talk about it.
How about you give it a go, Emma?
Yeah, I assume this is probably more of a Keen question on the support. But yeah, that decision came from an RFC. Again, another request for comments on CSS post-processing and what the community wanted. And the overwhelming response was I think it was 95% Tailwind. So the CLI team integrated support. So basically, the CLI now will detect if there is Tailwind configurations in your application and install as part of the post processor so that you don't have to have a custom Webpack. There's some other ones in there, like Purge CSS is the big one requested. I know Tailwind CSS users really like post or Purge CSS because Tailwind is so large. But right now it's just Tailwind. So yeah, does that answer? Keem, do you want to take anything else?
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it. The historical context is that it was a long-standing issue that was open back in 2017, I believe. Yeah.
Wow, it's been there for a while. I'm surprised.
As part of our effort to kind of clean up the issue on GitHub, we are going through all these old issues, and we really are trying our best to address them or resolve them in a reasonable manner.
Yeah, and there's a really great third-party library that also does some of that, and I know they have adapted really well to this change with the CLI team, so that if they basically look at if you're in a version that already has CLI support for Tailwind, and will go and add the purge part for you. So it's been cool to see the community respond very positively to it. But yeah, that's basically it.
Exciting. So this one's fun. Vote from the panel. Observables versus async await. Everyone want to give their vote?
Yeah, I got to vote on this. So I'm going to tell you something that you probably don't want to hear. Actually, I think the vote is for both. You really should see them both as tools in your tool belt. Sometimes when you have unpredictable things, observables really work well for you. But when you know what's about to happen and you have a short communication, async await works better. So you shouldn't really choose. Don't make them fight. They're really siblings that have different purposes.
Yeah,
That's my vote.
My answer was going to also be, it depends on what you're doing. There are some situations in which async await is really, really nice. So for example, in Angular CDK, we have this component test harness infrastructure, and we use async await really extensively there because it's a nice, concise API for waiting like atomic asynchronous operations that are like complete once. And it wouldn't really make sense to use observables for that. It would be really unergonomic. But at the same time, we have a number of like services and whatnot in the CDK and Angular material that are more streams of events, right? So we have like a service for when media query breakpoints change. And so you can set up a stream of that and filter on that to, change your UI layout based on those. And they're really entirely different use cases that call for different programming models.
Anyone that's on the panel want to weigh in?
My vote is for async await, but with a caveat, because async await is mostly a pull mechanism where the caller asks for information. What is missing is the push model. So if we couple async await with, say, function generators, then we get both push and pull.
Cool. So we're kind of out of questions. I do still have a few. I want to talk about, education in Angular, but I was just wondering from the panel if you guys want to talk about anything else like initiatives or make any comments that weren't asked here.
Yeah, I feel we can expand a little bit more on the prioritization part of things. Looks like a lot of the questions were somehow related, and this may bring extra clarity. And Cindy would be the expert here to tell us, just to share our prioritization process and
like how you guys prioritize features in Angular.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so the Angular leads, we meet on a weekly basis. Everyone puts their projects, in, and we discuss those particular items. They're prioritized or stack ranked against all of the queue of projects that are to be developed. They're resourced, and they move through the various project stages of in progress, work in progress, and through completion, and through execution.
Nice. Let me see. Okay, I love this one. Are you looking for help from the community? How can we get involved? And are there any specific tags people can look for?
Yeah, so on both the Angular repo and the Angular components repo, and I'm not sure about tooling, King would know on there. We use GitHub standard help wanted label. And then additionally, we have another label that is good first issue. A lot of them are documentation issues, which if you are new to GitHub are a good way of just learning the contribution flow, and should be relatively simple to actually make the change.
We use the same label on the CLI repo too.
And Dave recently shared a bunch of guidelines on how to help make the Angular documentation awesome. I will share them in the chat.
Thank you.
So can I touch on one thing before we go to another question? I know you asked about like Angular education. So part of the vision for our YouTube channel is to be one of those portals for education. And we have series going from things like new to Angular. How do you get started? What type of things do you use there? We have series around updates, about new features that drop. But then we also have series about things like working with like design and other advanced features with Angular. So we have quite a bit planned, and we're working really hard on creating that content, and then also enabling other people in the community to be able to create content as well, because we have an amazing community of people who have really great insights. And so we're working on all those fronts to do a lot around education.
Nice. And Emma, you and TikTok. I forget does Angular have an official TikTok or no? Okay. But it's coming in V12, right?
I feel like we need an Angular dance on the TikTok channel, just like something like an A, and like an N. Okay, I'm gonna stop.
I don't know. NGConf is musical themed, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's your viral songs. Just ready.
Let's go.
If someone creates a dance, make a trend.
Emma, that's all you. You got that in spades.
We'll see. That's the next YouTube video, is a dance tutorial. Look out.
I love it. Okay, so the next question is GraphQL or Rust?
It depends. There is no one answer to that, right? It's going to depend on your application and your backend and everything.
Okay, this one. Observables for lifecycle hooks?
Maybe. I think this is similar to the question we answered earlier of like, what about observable inputs? This kind of falls into the same category of like, do we want to do more reactive stuff or less reactive stuff or somewhere in between or both? It's something that, if we were to try to move towards supporting more reactive models, I think this is something that would be a good candidate, but we don't have any plans to do anything just yet.
Cool. Anything that we should be looking for at NGConf? Are you guys going to be doing any big announcements? Should we be freaking out preemptively?
On NGConf, we're going to share our efforts on reaching higher level of consistency with the ecosystem, and also a lot of background on some of the questions that were actually asked during this panel about observable inputs, about optional ng modules. We'll be talking about Cypress, and a lot of such stuff. We're also going to have a few sessions where we'll be discussing that harnesses mobile apps with PWA and performance with Core Web Vitals. So exciting things are coming up.
And also, just in general, it wouldn't be an announcement if we told you ahead of time.
Yeah. But you could say there's gonna be an announcement. Sounds like there is. So I'm looking forward to NGConf. It's coming up so soon.
I can give one little hint about something though that can be really fun. Keep your eye out for cool events with the community to hang out with us. I'm not going to say anything more, but we have some really dope stuff planned coming up for that. So just keep your eye out. That's all I'm saying. Pay attention. Follow the Twitter. Just pay attention to what we're doing because we got some magic on the way.
Woo! I really love this one. Is there any education, or can you add education about anti-patterns?
You can't read my writing, but I did. When I saw your question, I wrote it down because it's such a good idea. Yeah. So yes, we can add it to our list. Don't know when it'll get done, but we can add it to our list for sure.
I can see that YouTube, never do this in Angular. It's so clickbaity, but perfect at the same time.
Yeah.
I love it.
And see, Mark, if you want help coming up with those anti-patterns, just talk to me because I've done all of them.
I think we're all so guilty of that. So it's just having a panel. So what have you done wrong with Angular? Well, everybody's hand goes up and starts sharing their stories. That was good.
I don't know if there's a really good answer to this one. I don't really know strong is, a good word, but like, do you have suggestions for a strong structure in large scale Angular projects?
You want to make sure you get a lot of rebar in there to hold things up, so it's very weight bearing.
And generally, we're trying to incorporate all the best practices we discover in our tooling. So just following the guidance, following the style guides, this should be generally bring you close to a scalable solution. There are some tricky things, for example, around consistent state management that might not be obvious immediately, but I guess this would be the only thing that needs to be put like more thought into. Oh, I mean, there are other things along the way for sure, but just following our official recommendation and tooling, this should be a good step forward.
This is one that I'm super passionate about, and this gets asked a lot. Architectural best practices. What are the resources that you all recommend? Do you guys have any official resources?
So I think one piece of advice I would give here, and maybe that's a catch-all piece of advice, is don't think about things as trying to find the Angular way of doing it, right? Angular is a tool that solves a certain set of problems, but at the end of the day, software is software. And so any best practices for software architecture are also best practices for Angular as applications. And there's probably some Angular specific stuff, but like at the end of the day, it boils down to like write good software. There was one that was a bit further up about ngdeep that I can talk a bit about.
Okay, let me put that up on the screen.
Yeah, so the context here is we have this thing called ngdeep that lets you bypass view encapsulation and style stuff. And it has been deprecated and there is no replacement for it. And why is that? It's because when Angular was first written back in 2015 times, the Shadow DOM v0 spec was the thing. And that spec included the deep selector for CSS, which would be piercing for native Shadow DOM. And because Angular was attempting to emulate that native Shadow DOM, it also supported the deep, ngdeep in this case, to bypass view encapsulation. After Angular shipped, Shadow DOM evolved to the next Shadow DOM version, and they dropped the deep because the standards body didn't like it. Various parties, I think Apple wasn't a fan of it because it basically, like, it made moot having encapsulation in the first place if you could just drop deep in and ignore it. And so it was removed from the Shadow DOM specification, but because Angular had already shipped with it, it was already there and people started depending on it. So we're really in a situation now where we don't think people should use it since it breaks CSS encapsulation. But also we can't just remove it because that would break a bunch of people who are depending on it. And ultimately, like in the long term, there's a couple of things that are going to end up being the thing replacing this. It is going to be a combination of CSS variables, constructible style sheets, particularly with the way that you can adopt style sheets into Shadow DOM itself. And the CSS standards body is working on a way to do style scoping without Shadow DOM, because it was, depending on how you look at it, you could say it was a mistake to tie Shadow DOM and style encapsulation together in one spec. And so there is a group looking at doing encapsulated styles decoupled from Shadow DOM, and that may also play a part in this. But for the short term, ngdeep is going to stay around, but the recommendation is still not to use it and to use some other approach to do styling.
Cool, thanks for answering that. And I think that's it for most of the questions, unless you guys have any others that you saw in the chat that you want to answer.
There is one in there. It says, Shadow DOM, yes or no? The answer on that one is, again, it depends. Shadow DOM, it comes with trade-offs. There are some things that are just straight up easier with global styles. You also end up using Shadow DOM content projection. I think they call it node distribution instead of ng content, which is also a different API and may not be as nice. Like Shadow DOM, you're using named slots instead of the selector-based content projection in Angular, which again comes from the Shadow DOM v0 specification and then changed later. There's also some accessibility challenges with Shadow DOM. The kind of conventional way you do query selectors or kind of any kind of walking of your application tree changes. So overall, there's a lot of like pros and cons of using it. We're still not using it for any Angular stuff ourselves. And I don't necessarily see that changing in 2021, but it's something that comes up and we just talk about it again from time to time.
Well, we have a lot more questions now that I said we were out of questions. So any updates on Tailwind JIT?
JIT support in Tailwind, as far as I know, is currently still under development. It is an experimental feature, so we will continue to evaluate it. And once it is stable, we will see what kind of changes we need to make in Angular CLI to support that. But overall, I think with JIT, it's gonna, I think like in one of the comments someone mentioned, it's gonna make purge unnecessary. So it is moving in a good direction.
Any plans for a lightweight version of Angular?
I don't think we would ever move into a model where we had two different variants or flavors of Angular. In general, you always want to avoid situations in which you're fragmenting an ecosystem, right? Like the canonical example of this is look at like Python 2 and Python 3. And just the mess you get into of incompatibility between versions and having to know like which runtime you're using and things like that. And so any approach that would be like, oh, well, like there's Angular and Angular Lite and Angular can do these things, but not Angular Lite. And like, this is a best practice over here, but not over here. You're eventually fragmenting the ecosystem in terms of like libraries and best practices and content between those two. And it makes it really hard to maintain any kind of reasonableness. And so I don't see us doing anything like that. However, we're always thinking about how to make Angular more lightweight in terms of either performance or payload size or simplicity. And that is always something we're keeping in mind as we decide what to work on. So I wouldn't expect to see it like a lightweight version of Angular, but you can see Angular maybe getting more lightweight over time.
Yeah, with the tree shaking model, we're trying to give you what you need. So you can start incrementally adopting concepts and features, and in your bundle, you're going to get what you're using. That we're trying to make it Angular progressive, let's say, in this way.
Any plans for expanding the CDK in the short term?
Depends on what you mean by short term. We have some stuff that is kind of baking in CDK experimental. So there's CDK dialog, menu, list box, and combo box all are in CDK experimental and are pretty usable. I'm holding off on moving those into stable because there's a couple of features that I want to get in the framework before I make them stable that will make them much more useful. Those features are not in our slice of roadmap yet, but basically this is maybe a little nuanced, but the ability to augment the injector for embedded views or ng templates when you render them out, and also the ability to add directives to host elements, I think would make that stuff a lot more useful. And so I'm kind of holding off on moving or graduating that stuff into stable until we get stuff like that in the framework. I also am trying to figure out how we can get more CDK-like stuff worked on in partnership with other teams inside of Google. It's challenging to convince other teams that this is in their best interest. So it's something that I'm kind of pushing on, but I don't have anything to anything that's going to happen in the short term. I think in like the next 4 to 6 months.
I know we've already talked about this, but maybe if you guys just kind of want to reiterate, or if you have any specific comments about will Jest ever be a default for unit tests?
Do you want to take this, Miko?
Okay. Well, I don't see it being the default for unit tests. You have options for using it right now. It's just a testing framework you can add to your project. So if you prefer it, go ahead and do that. I see a future when we may have different options for unit testing, but there are no concrete plans for this just yet.
Here's one question.
Yeah, so dynamic height virtual scrolling in the CDKs, it's been an experimental for quite some time. We do want to move that into stable. One thing that may help in getting that moved into stable is when we do deprecate IE11 and eventually remove it, we'll be able to fully depend on intersection observer for this, which is part of our implementation for this. I think we're doing some like really strange stuff to try to make it work in IE11, or maybe it just doesn't even work in IE11. I don't quite remember off the top of my head. But getting rid of that IE11 support would make it a lot more viable for us to do this.
Any questions that I missed in the chat that you guys saw that we want to answer? I think I got most of them. Cool. Well, I think another thing is, what are other ways that you'd want the community to get involved if it wasn't code contributions? If you guys have any wish lists for the community to do?
Yeah. So one thing that was mentioned earlier is we're planning on doing an RFC for Protractor tomorrow. In general, we try to do RFCs like this anytime we want community feedback. And so responding to those, even if you would, like, I know a lot of people would come into it and be like, they're not going to care what I think. It's like, yeah, we do actually care what everyone thinks. We want to hear about the kind of application you're working on and how it would impact you. So responding to those RFCs is really valuable.
Yeah, and building content generally. People love content using Angular with a particular technology. So if you have expertise in, I don't know, .NET, Rails, Rust, whatever, yeah, good examples for people. People love to see real use cases for Angular and learn from them.
Cool. Minka, did you see that comment in the private chat? I don't know if you want to answer that. I think no.
We are, DevTools. We're thinking of expanding our private beta, and probably this is going to happen in the next months, next couple of months. So we are going to move forward with it eventually. I said it's very likely that DevTools is going to land soon, but still hard to commit to a date.
All right. Well, any last comments before we say goodbye and thank you from you all? I'm going to go ahead and add the panelists. Somebody just asked, can we see the list of names of people talking here? So there you go. Angular team, one of the reasons why I joined the Angular community is because they were so welcoming and so inviting. And back in 2017, somehow too many people asked me to come to NGConf. And after Jules asked, I was like, okay, I can't keep saying no. And then I just fell in love with it because the Angular community is just so welcoming and just so awesome, so willing to pitch in and everything like that. So these folks on the Angular team are also super amazing. And there is, I mean, feel free to chat with them on Twitter, find them on Twitter. Everyone's on Twitter, or on GitHub. And, I know a lot of people kind of get shy and they're like, oh, why would they care about what I have to say? Kind of what Jeremy said, right? But, just get involved and see, right? Like there's so many opportunities out there to do amazing things.
Yeah. And I'll like plus one that I'm happy to answer questions on Twitter anytime. The only two questions I won't answer are please help me debug my app and when is feature X coming out? But aside from that, like any just kind of general questions about Angular, always happy to answer.
Yeah. Well, very cool. I'm going to go ahead and share. So, Jeremy, you're Gelborn. Oh my gosh, I can't remember all of them. I think I'm just going to add the tweet where I tagged all of you. And I'll add that in the comments right before we leave. Otherwise, here we go. I found it. There we go. All right. See if that worked. Yes. Okay. There is everybody's Twitter handles. So again, watch for Emma's TikTok. Emma, I really do hope it happens. Check out Mark's amazing YouTube videos and definitely just hang out with everybody on Twitter. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. ThisDot, who's one of the sponsors, is hiring. So again, if you get excited about Angular, I mean, we have just such amazing Angular people on our team, and we're building a really cool app in Angular right now, and I can't wait to release it because it's so nice. So preview soon, and make sure to like and subscribe, and again, follow Angular YouTube as well to check out some of Mark's amazing YouTube videos on Angular. Thanks for joining us all.